This week, Jonny Robot heads down to the quiet little mountain town of South Park in his quest for the Stick of Truth. Mel gets her platformer fix with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and I get some hands-on time with super shiny virtual reality headset, the Oculus Rift. This is Player Attack. Hi, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this week the gaming world was shocked to learn Jack Tretton was stepping down from his post as CEO and President of Sony Computer Entertainment America. Tretton had been with the company since its inception in 1995, spearheading the launch of the original PlayStation into North America and fronting PlayStation E3 press conferences from 2007. On April 1st, Sean Layden will step up into the top job. He is currently Executive Vice President and COO of Sony Network Entertainment International. On to something completely different, and Titanfall hit Xbox One and PC this week, signalling one of the biggest launches of 2014. EA and Respawn have confirmed that the mech-heavy shooter will indeed have a bunch of DLC in two flavours, free and premium. If you want to fork over some real-world cash, you can either pick it up piecemeal as it is released, or snag the season pass. As is often the case, that way will save you money. Now, if you haven't yet picked up Titanfall for whatever reason, there is still a way you can get your mech pilot fix. The Titanfall Arcade is a pretty lovely little time waster at titanfallarcade.com. Take the brand new Titans and throw them into an old school arcade game, you're on the right track. Playing asteroids with an invincible 22-foot tall war machine instead of a featureless triangle, well worth the price of admission. And did we mention it's free? Meanwhile, spare a thought for gamers looking forward to playing End of Nations. The game has been in development for years now, starting out as an MMORTS before morphing into a MOBA, but now it seems that developer Tryon Worlds has put it out of its misery. Technically, the game is officially on hold as the studio evaluates potential paths forward, but we all know what that means, right? Heroes of the Storm, on the other hand, the game formerly known as Blizzard Dota and then as Blizzard All-Stars, is progressing quite nicely. Blizzard explains that the MOBA still has a lot of work ahead of it, but the studio has just opened up a teeny tiny technical alpha test just to make sure that everything works. Invitations are being sent out to a very limited number of participants, all from the US at this stage, but if you want to be considered in an upcoming wave, make sure your Battle.net profile has opted in to Heroes of the Storm testing. And sticking with the theme of games that have changed names partway through development, Gearbox Software has confirmed that Homeworld HD is now much more than just a high-def polish, so we are now told to look out for Homeworld Remastered. The game, due out hopefully later this year, is more than a simple re-release or up-res, instead taking on board feedback and input from fans, mod makers, series veterans, and some of the original developers to make a fully fledged revamped version. Of course, if you'd prefer to spend your time firmly in memory lane, that's also an option. Gearbox is promising classic versions of Homeworld and Homeworld 2 releasing alongside the remastered ones. A couple of eagerly anticipated games got release dates this week too. First up, Murdered Soul Suspect, which has been described as Ghost meets Die Hard, is due out from June 3rd. You play as Ronan O'Connor, faced with the not-so-simple task of solving your own murder. Taking a slightly less supernatural approach and throwing in a whole lot of technology, Watch Dogs is officially due out around the world on May 27. The game was originally planned for release alongside the Xbox One and PS4 as a launch title in late 2013. However, publisher Ubisoft bumped Watch Dogs down the list a bit with the extra time used to refine and polish the game.
Big explosions, honey.
In cinema news, The Last of Us is in line for a film adaptation. This one should survive the transition okay. Neil Druckmann, a creative director on the game, is writing the script for the movie, with an assortment of Naughty Dog developers making the leap to work on the film. Sam Raimi is also reportedly on board, picking up the rights under his Ghost House Pictures label, with Naughty Dog co-president Evan Wells saying the studio couldn't have found better partners. And finally this week, The Bat is back. Rocksteady Games has confirmed its return to Arkham with the announcement of Batman Arkham Knight, due out on Xbox One, PS4 and PC sometime this year. It's described as the explosive conclusion to the series that started with Arkham Asylum and moved on to Arkham City, as Arkham Knight puts the Batman up against the ultimate threat. Scarecrow is back, and he's brought a posse. Rocksteady is a big fan of teasing out little pieces of information over months, but we do know that Penguin, Two-Face and Harley Quinn will be making an appearance, and for once it's not the enemies that are the biggest deal here. 2 words: drivable Batmobile.
In death, I will love you forever. Your father, Thomas.
For more information on any of these stories, or to keep up to date with the latest gaming news, head to playerattack.com. But for now, stick around, we've got plenty more still to come.
Humans and elves of Sauron, a great evil has descended upon us. I believe we are facing a threat to our entire world. Our only hope is for our 2 factions to join forces. Tonight, we are no longer elves, goths, or girls. Tonight, we fight as one!
If I just magically gained the ability to time travel, like right now, there are 3 things I would accomplish without a second thought. 1. Get last week's Johnny to buy more toilet paper. 2. Gently smother 1983's George Lucas whilst whispering, "This is for the best." And 3. Reassure childhood me that one day, in the far-off distant future of 2014, there will be a good South Park game. Nay, an amazing one. South Park: The Stick of Truth is the South Park game us MTV generation kids have been waiting for. Sure, we had to grin and bear it through the crappy 90s FPS and rally tie-ins, but now we finally have what I can only describe as a playable episode. Like a 16-hour awesome episode. That's also an RPG. To walk in the room and look at it, you would swear you were watching the show, which is by no means a negative criticism. That is rad. The good folks over at Obsidian have taken the time to capture the wonderful crappiness that the show's visuals have always sported. This, combined with the original voice cast of 3 people, makes it the most authentic South Park experience you will ever have in a game. In true South Park fashion, the narrative is all kinds of crazy. What starts off as a simple imaginary kids game revolving around Grand Wizard Cartman and Elf King Kyle fighting over a piece of driftwood escalates into alien attacks, the dead rising from their graves, and good old-fashioned government conspiracy. You start off the game like any other RPG, by creating your character, where you are spoiled for choices on customization, as long as you don't want to be a girl. That said though, I had more fun with this than I probably should have. Don't you roll your eyes at me though, because you will too. It reminds me of doing it as a kid with their 2.0 build of their website, but now this character had reason, he had a purpose, to get me a magic stick. It wasn't long before my mensch of a Jew mage was out on the streets of South Park, exploring for collectibles like Chin Pokemon and interacting with the locals. No joke, I spent hours doing this. Hours. I wanted to hear what everybody had to say because it was straight up hilarious. There was not a dull moment, and this even carried over into the battles. Sure, it's like regular turn-based RPG combat, but it plays very similar to the way Super Mario RPG did, and if you're not one of the 4 people that got that reference, here's what I mean. Instead of just picking your attacks, like say Pokemon, you have to hit a specific button at the right time to do more damage or string together combos. This also goes for blocking, where a well-timed button tap can avoid you hurling the controller at the screen. This mechanic, combined with the buff-debuff system they have in place, makes for a far more involved style of gameplay that requires tactics and timing instead of just occasionally pushing a button. Yeah, I'm looking at you again, Final Fantasy. But really, the best part is when Man Bear Pig and the Underpant Gnomes, with Mr. Hanky just riding in. Sorry, was that a bit annoying? Well, you just had a taste of what it's like to play the Australian cut of the game, and you thought we were going to get through this without talking about censorship. Sure, you can say, "Johnny, the cut material was rude and offensive," upon which I will look at you quizzically and utter, "Have you seen South Park before?" A show notoriously known for pushing social boundaries and norms, which often strangely ends up addressing social issues in a humorous and relatable way. But that begs the question, if the cut content was so grossly insensitive, how in the world did the other stuff get in? Racial slurs, apparently all good. Perpetuation of negative stereotypes. Just fine. Jesus, beating in the head of a zombie Nazi fetus with a dildo? A-okay. The word of the day here, kids, is hypocrisy. All of this stuff, cut content included, is rated M when broadcast as a show, but as soon as it's interactive, bam, no good. Again, just another prime example of how flawed our new R18 rating system still proves to be. But despite this minor upset, South Park: The Stick of Truth is hands down one of the most fun and hilarious games I've played in years. The combat's easy to grasp, yet deep enough for you to have interest, and wonderful pacing means you never need to grind. As a piece of fan service, it delivers on every front, and even those unfamiliar with this little mountain town will have a blast. There is no way that if you buy this game, you'll end up with the short end of the stick. Come on, sticks are really hard to pun with, man.
Don't be fooled. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze might look like a kid's game, but in reality, it's a difficult, challenging monster of a thing, and it's all the better for it. Everybody's favourite ape first hit gaming screens back in 1981, making Donkey Kong even older than Super Mario Bros. His first outing was as the bad guy, but it didn't take long for Nintendo to realise the comic gorilla was a decent fellow at heart, letting him star in music games, races, fighters, and of course, side-scrolling platformers like this one. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is a Wii U exclusive, a direct sequel to the 2011 Wii exclusive Donkey Kong Country Returns. That said, there's not much of a storyline to carry over, but the controls are more than familiar. This time around, Donkey, Diddy, Dixie and Cranky Kong are celebrating Donkey's birthday, but his party is interrupted by a bunch of frozen Vikings known as Snowmads, and all four are blown away to a far-off island. Your job, obviously, is to get them all home safely. This is Donkey's 5th side-scrolling platform excursion, and it's his first in high def, something Nintendo are more than happy to take advantage of. The graphics are gorgeous. Every single level in each of the 6 individual worlds has been done as a stand-alone showpiece. You'll play through storms and tornadoes, an underwater tomb, and even in the middle of what seems to be a raging bushfire, as well as the inevitable downhill minecart race. Despite the fact that this one is on the Wii U, the developers have done nothing to take advantage of the second screen. This is actually a refreshing change. As much as I love having a map on the Wii U controller, I'm not really a fan of having that feature shoehorned in. Tropical Freeze doesn't bother with any of that. You can use the second screen for a bit of off-screen play, if you want to go play in a hammock or someone else wants to watch TV, but other than that, it just sits idle. Regardless of which screen you choose to play it on, you will need your wits about you. The average male gorilla weighs somewhere around 500 pounds or 250 kilograms. That's just a bit heavier than your average male plumber, so it's a nice detail that Donkey Kong feels heavier in-game than other platform heroes like Mario. Having the extra Kongs around to help out with jumping can be really handy. Choose your companion carefully. Diddy has a barrel jetpack, Dixie can spin her ponytail into a propeller, while Cranky can use his cane as a sort of pogo stick, so each one can access areas and defeat enemies that the others can't. These companions will help you out in a couple of different ways. If you're playing solo, they'll tag along with you, bounce around and help out wherever the AI thinks they should. But if you want a little team play, the second character can be fully controlled by a second person, which actually adds quite a bit to the game. You'll both get twice as many hearts, that is, twice as much health. If you want to be a bit cheeky, fire up the second controller and get your partner character to climb on Donkey Kong's back, even when you're just playing by yourself. Hey presto, double health plus the nifty jumping abilities. Both things come in pretty handy while you're playing. As I mentioned, this game is hard. If you're wondering why Tropical Freeze throws so many extra lives at you, it's because you'll chew through them like so much bubblegum. You'll also pick up more by collecting the bananas dotted around the level, 1 life for every 100, and you can spend your hard-earned coins on other bonuses like shields, balloons, and extra friend-containing barrels. There's more than a few nifty bonuses tucked away in each level too. Secrets are hidden in plain sight, and you'll need to pay close attention to gather up all of the puzzle pieces, KONG letters, and other bits and pieces stashed around the place. Overall, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is wonderful, as long as you're the sort of person who can handle a little frustration. It doesn't necessarily get easier as you go along, but the sense of accomplishment you'll get after beating a particularly tricky level is second to none. If you liked the challenge of games like Flappy Bird, didn't mind the number of deaths you racked up in Dark Souls, and don't feel too awkward about yelling at a cartoon monkey for falling off a cliff again, this is definitely one for you.
For people who don't know, what is the Oculus Rift?
Sure, so the Oculus Rift is a new virtual reality headset designed specifically really for immersive gaming. So it's all about putting the player inside the game, making them feel like they're completely immersed in the game world. And we think it's really the first time that players have been able to finally step inside their favorite games and experience them like they're actually there, which is a whole different ball game.
It is, not to show my age, but it is the sort of VR, virtual reality experience that we were promised when I was much, much younger. Why has it taken so long to come out?
Sure. So virtual reality, has always really been the holy grail of gaming, right? Ever since we were kids, The Matrix or Snow Crash, there's been a lot of science fiction around VR. And I think VR has had a lot of false starts over the years. The technology wasn't quite there, despite what maybe, people in marketing told us. So over the last 5 to 10 years, I think the explosion in mobile really has made VR both affordable and a lot more precise and accurate. So you've got very high performance sensor technology at very low cost, very high quality display technology, again at very low cost. The same technology that's in your mobile phone is actually being used in the Rift. And then you've got GPUs, right? NVIDIA and AMD have done a great job of pushing graphics processing technology forward. And we're almost at the point where we have photorealistic graphics. So when all those stars align, you're able to build a very quality package that brings a very immersive VR experience to the average gamer.
How does it work?
Good question. So basically, like I said, we're using MEMS sensor technology, so accelerometers, gyroscopes, and magnetometers. We've developed custom trackers specifically for VR that tracks your head movement super precisely and very, very low latency. Then we've got some custom optics along with some screen technology that basically makes it so you can't see the screen when you put it on your eyes. And that makes you feel, as you look 360 degrees, like you're completely immersed in the world. And then there's stereo 3D. So stereo 3D, it's unlike stereo 3D on a monitor or a TV. You're actually receiving parallel images, offset for your interpupillary distance. So that makes it so it's the same way you perceive data in the real world. So if you, are not a fan of stereo 3D, don't worry, because this stereo 3D is more like real life. So when you combine all those things, it creates very, again, immersive VR experience.
It's been floating around for a little while now. It's made appearances at E3 and other trade shows and that sort of thing. What sort of response have you been getting from fans?
So it's always a very positive response. We don't have many people say, oh, this is boring. I think the common response is sort of the jaw dropping and like, oh, this is so cool. And I think, as we have shown it off and the different iterations of it, from very early duct tape prototype to the dev kit to now these HD prototypes, we're constantly surprised by the reaction from people. It's always fun to share, and we're always glad to show people, it's not the holodeck yet, we're not at the Matrix yet, but it's a step in the right direction, and we're really trying to take those steps to push the industry toward, true VR gaming.
What sort of games do you guys have in mind that it will work with in the near future?
So the current games that if you bought a Rift dev kit you could play right now are really Half-Life 2 and Team Fortress 2. And they both, Valve has come out and said that they're big supporters of VR and Oculus. So that's pretty exciting. There's tons of indie games out there, little experiences from Guillotine Simulators. Titans of Space is a space simulator. EVR is a new tech demo by the guys at CCP. So there's tons of developers building content. We haven't announced quite too many AAA titles for the consumer launch quite yet, because a lot of developers are still working on it, and at the same time we're working on the consumer hardware. But as we draw closer to the launch, we'll have more and more exciting announcements around games for the platform. There are actually so many interesting experiences that people have made that we would have never thought of, right? I mean, when we started with some simple ports of Unreal Engine, and we were working with the Hawken team on Hawken VR. and suddenly there's guillotine simulators and space simulators, and there's a simulator where you are a dog. But they're all so interesting, and I think VR opens up so many new doors for developers and for gamers. And as gamers, that's really what we should be excited for, right? The next 5 years are going to see such an incredible leap in technology, especially VR gaming, which is really in its complete infancy right now. And so as developers learn what works, what's fun, it's going to be a great time for gamers everywhere.
It's almost like the same sort of indie explosion that we saw when Kinect first came out and when we started seeing the dev kits come out for that. Was that the sort of thing that you guys had in mind, or were you thinking that, you know, people were just it was going to be a big boys toy and the little indies weren't going to get their feet wet?
No, actually, we were from the start really interested in indie development, and I think a lot of us at the company thought that the killer app could very, very well come from an indie who was just going to do something crazy and outlandish that, you know, no one would think would work but for him. And indies are also, they have a little bit more flexibility, right? They can take a few more chances, they can iterate and move more quickly. That's not to say the killer app won't come from a AAA, but we did our engine integrations with Unity, UDK, Unreal Engine 3, and UE4, all to make sure that indie developers had all the tools they need to really jump into the platform. So a frictionless dev platform has always been the goal from the start. And we're huge fans of the indie community and what they're doing. In fact, there's a bunch of great indie demos out on the show floor here at PAX Australia. So if you have a chance, definitely go check them out.
So it's currently in sort of dev status, there are prototypes, there are an assortment of different prototypes. When will this be available for consumers to get their hands on and get it strapped in?
Sure, so we haven't announced an official release date yet, I'm sorry, but it's coming. So, you know, gamers should be excited now. This isn't something that's 5 to 10 years down the road. So stay excited, stay tuned. We'll have more announcements, you know, as we draw closer to the consumer launch.
Fabulous, thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure, thanks for stopping by.
And that's about it for this edition of Player Attack. Thanks for watching. Next week, it's back to the dark and scary for a moment with a look at Daylight, a brand new horror game due out in April. We find out just how well Plants vs. Zombies translates into a third-person shooter with Garden Warfare, and finally get our hands on a little handheld J-pop action with Hatsune Miku Project Diva F out now for PlayStation Vita. In the meantime, you can catch us on playerattack.com. We're on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, and if you've got something you want to say, send us an email, mailbox@playerattack.com, or just hop on our forums. Till next week, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this is Player Attack.